In this video, I'll be going over something called coterminal angles. So let's talk about this definition and then just what it means. So if I have two angles, let's call them alpha and beta. They're coterminal if there's an integer k. So remember, an integer is any whole positive or negative whole number. 0, 1, 2, dot, 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 dot. So where k is an integer, so what this is saying is the measurement of angle beta is equal to the measure of angle alpha plus that integer times 360. So in plain English, what this means is coterminal angles, terminal angles are 360 degrees, and it could be plus or minus, away from each other. Okay, and just like we saw in a previous video, 360 degrees, that's in degrees, obviously. I could also say 2 pi radians, so or plus or minus 2 pi radians. So what this means is if I have an angle, let's say it's in standard position, so this angle right here. Okay, so any time I draw an angle that ends up in that position is coterminal. So similarly, if I draw this angle here, now if I keep rotating it around, but now I have gone around one full rotation, but I end up in that same position. So I took that initial angle and I added 360 degrees to it, but I still end up in the same position. So those angles are coterminal. Similarly, I could land in that same position by rotating the other direction. And then I end up here. Okay, so those angles are, all three of those green angles are coterminal, even though they would all have different measures from each other. Okay, that first one is, I don't know, it's between 90 and 180. Let me just maybe give an estimate. Let's say it's 120 degrees. That second angle is 120, but it's plus, I add 360 degrees to it, so it's 480. So 480 and 120 are coterminal to each other. That last angle, I start with 120, but then I subtracted 360. So that gives me negative 240 degrees. So that angle is also coterminal to those other two. Okay, so coterminal angles are, the language I sometimes use is, they are copies of 360 degrees away from each other. Okay, so let's look at this example. Given angle theta is 10 degrees, find two positive and two negative coterminal angles. Give the angles in degrees. So I just start with 10 degrees, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 1 times 360 degrees. 360 times 1 is 360 plus 10, 370. That is a coterminal angle. Similarly, I could say 10 plus 2 times 360. That's 720 plus 10, 730. Excuse me. So those are coterminal angles, and I could just keep going. And in fact, I could come up with an infinite number of coterminal angles. And to tie this back to my definition up here, k is 1 or 2, etc. Now to come up with negative coterminal angles, I start with 10 degrees, but instead of adding, instead of having positive k values, I could say negative 1 times 360. So that's negative 360 plus 10 is negative 350 degrees. Similarly, I could say 10 degrees plus negative 2 times 360. That's negative 720 plus 10 is negative 710. And I could keep going. Okay, so all of these are coterminal angles to our original angle 10. Now, in this next example, it says, determine whether the given pair of angles are coterminal. In other words, are these copies of 360 degrees away from each other? So this first one, I'm going to take 190 degrees plus, I'm going to say k times 360 is equal to negative 170. So in other words, can I solve for k so that it comes out to an integer? So a positive or negative whole number. So if I subtract 190 from both sides, I get 360k is equal to negative 360. And yes, k is equal to negative 1. So because that is an integer, we would say yes, these are coterminal. These angles are coterminal to each other. So the next one, maybe try this next one. Hit pause on the video and see if you can do it on your own before I do it. All right, so 150 degrees plus k times 880. Oops, just kidding. Plus k times 360 equals to 880. So can I solve this for k, or when I solve this for k, do I get an integer? 880 minus 150 is 730. And k will not come out to an integer. It's going to be a little bit more than 2. So k is not an integer. So we'd say not coterminal.